Hello, Manel. Good afternoon from Sri Lanka.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Very, very good.
Okay, so Manel, my namesister, just for the one that doesn't know, Manel is Sinhalese name for the national flower.
Hmm.
So, Manel, please tell us when were you adopted from Sri Lanka and where to, and maybe a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So I was adopted at 7 days old, well, 10 days old, and by two Australian pe people, and came to Australia when I was 7 weeks old. And yeah, I lived in Adelaide my whole life. I have two older half siblings from my father's side, my adoptive father's side, and two younger siblings that are like from both my parents. So I'm not genetically related to anybody in my family. No one else in my family is adopted either. Um, so like growing up, I guess was uh interesting and difficult, and adoption or being adopted was always like on the forefront of conversations when I met people who knew about my family, or like even just random people would say, "Oh, who are you here with?" And I'd be like, "That's my family." And no one would ever think that I was like related to them. Um, because my adoptive family are Caucasian and European Irish descent. So that like I feel like my parents and my extended family were always very um open, and um, there wasn't ever any negative conversation or connotations towards me being adopted. So it was always very, like it looked on very positively. So I think that's where my outlook of being adopted has come from, is I feel like very grateful for the opportunities that I have had. And I know that I wouldn't be the person that I am today without having been adopted. Um, which I think has helped in my development as a person, kind of moving forwards from there.
Hmm. It's a
Um,
little bit unusual to be,
yeah.
or maybe it's not, but it's a little bit unusual to have we're brought up in a family with so many biological children.
Yeah.
Normally, in
Yeah.
Denmark, most of the people that adopt is because they cannot have any children. So can
Mm.
you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So my father was adopted. No, my father was married before my mother. And he had two biological children with his ex-wife. And then after he married my mother, he had a vasectomy before that, and they tried to have it reversed, and that didn't happen. And they'd always wanted to adopt a child anyway. That was something that they felt very strongly about. And they wanted to adopt someone from a poorer country, to help give them a better life. So, hence why I'm here. But then they went on to have two other children through IVF, which is my younger brother and sister.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, and we didn't know that for a very long time, that was how we all kind of came to be here. Um, yeah.
So your father, we call him your father because you will call
Yeah.
him your father, but the adopted father, he actually tried many different ways to have children, biological and
Yeah.
adoption and also
Yeah.
through fertilized
Yeah.
milk. So would you point out things that would be had been a challenge for you growing up in a diverse family like that?
Yeah. And I think my siblings all look like and resemble and are genetically related to their parents. So for me, I always felt like, oh, I was a little bit different to everybody else. And I think when I first started, or not even I noticed, it was like being pointed out to me all the time that you look different. Like that can't be your sister because you don't look the same. And being the eldest sibling out of the like three younger ones on my parents' side. Um, like I started school first and I was very protective of my younger brother and sister. And like if my sister got picked on or there was something going on at school, I would stick up for them. And then people would say, like, why are you sticking up for them? And so then I'd have to explain, like, we're related, we're family. I'm sticking up for my brother or sister, and then have to explain like why we look different. So I think I've spent a lot of my formative years like explaining to people, and I think that's why I feel so comfortable talking about it, and it's not something that I'm embarrassed about or see as something to be shameful or a secret. I think it's very hard in my situation to have it be a secret, because it's very obvious. Um, but yeah, that was kind of like the beginning of my childhood. It wasn't something that anyone was trying to hide. And then I think as I started to develop my identity as a teenager, that's where it started to get a little bit more difficult for me to develop who I was, because I didn't really have much information about where I'd come from or why I was adopted or any real information about my family other than my mother's birth name, my birth mother's name. So
And did your parents go to Sri Lanka to adopt you?
yeah, so my parents had tried to adopt a child from Sri Lanka um, a, a few years before they adopted me, and the adoptions closed within the country for a period of time. I believe that was partly to do with war, I think. And then when they reopened is when my parents got a phone call to say, like, we have a baby, like come and get it. And so they traveled over to Sri Lanka, and they met me when I was, yeah, 10 days old, and then stayed with me through the process of all of the adoption kind of legalities and stuff like that. And then spent time with my birth mother while she was in the orphanage or the um, yeah, Salvation Army home. And then yeah, brought me home to Australia.
So when we talked together yesterday, you told me
Yeah.
about something interesting about a family that your parents support.
Yeah, so when they came over to Sri Lanka, I'm not sure if it was while they were there or after, but they started up sponsorship with a family in Sri Lanka who um we maintained contact with. Like she would make all these beautifully like intricate cards, like Christmas cards, Easter cards, and we've kept them all and we still have them. And she would send them to us and we would send money and I would write letters to her. And we kind of kept up that relationship throughout the years. And then when I was 12, my parents took time off work and took like our whole family on a big tour. And we went to lots of different countries. And one of the countries that we went to was Sri Lanka. And that was the first time that I'd been back to my country. And I think I was 11 or 12 at that time. I think I was 12 when we went back, and that was the first time I saw the orphanage that I was born in and spent time in. It's where I saw like a lot of my country and the culture and stuff that I didn't really know about and didn't have a lot of connection to being in Australia. At that point, being in primary school, I didn't have many or lots of people around me that were Sri Lankan and lived that culture. I knew quite a few Sri Lankan people who were adopted as well, like children. And so the culture of an adoptee is quite different to what it would be had we been with Sri Lankan people or living in Sri Lanka. So the closest I got to understanding our culture was I participated in traditional Indian dancing from like the time I was 5 till 18. So I did have a little bit of culture, but not quite the same.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so anyway, my parents sponsored her, and then when we were 12, we went back and we met her and her family. and kind of kept up that relationship. And then when things went a little bit more digital with social media and stuff, we linked up through Facebook and Messenger. And then when we went back a second time to Sri Lanka, she was like very instrumental in me being able to find my birth family
Mm.
after
Can
that.
we,
So
if we just dwell a little bit about the first traveling to Sri Lanka.
yeah.
So you were 12
Hmm.
years old.
Yeah.
During your stay and also maybe after you came back to Australia, did it bring any thoughts to you? Did it make you feel more at ease, more as a whole person, or
Mhm.
did it start for you to question a lot of things?
I think when I went back there, like I obviously noticed how beautiful the country was, but it was the first time where I was really exposed to like poverty or um like those kinds of situations or people begging on the streets. Like I hadn't been exposed to that at all living where I lived in Adelaide. And at that point we lived in a suburb called Prospect, which is quite effluent. Um and well, affluent. And so like I didn't really yeah, it was a big eye opener for me to see that side of it. And I think that they're probably my biggest memories and the thing that had impact on me the most. I think the other thing was seeing all the other children in the orphanage when I went there and kind of having that connection with them that I was one of them.
Mm.
But when I went back to Sri Lanka, I think it was very obvious that I was quite Western in the way that I dressed, in the way that I acted. And also I had all of these white people with me. So, and I think at that point, this was like 25 years ago now, um, there wasn't a lot of different cultures that were there in the country. And so having people with white fair skin and blonde hair was quite novel. So there was a lot of attention around us a lot of the time and people wanting to be with my brother and sister and my mom and have photos with them and things like that. So I think like the attention was off me a lot, but I still didn't feel like I fit in
Mm.
there into what it was like culturally.
Hmm. Okay. So also you mentioned about in your upbringing in Australia that you actually
Mhm.
met other adoptees. Did you
Yeah.
guys kind of mirror yourself in each other, or was it more, okay, I'm adopted, but I'm also an Australian. I am. Did you talk about it? Did you reflect on your identity when you were talking with each other?
I feel like when I was like kind of struggling with developing like my identity of who I was, we did talk a lot. And we were all very close and like siblings, I suppose, for each other, and we still are very close. Um, but yeah, I would talk to them a lot about, feeling like I didn't belong and how do you kind of yeah, I don't know, fit into your family. And I think the thing that was most difficult to me and what like my mind always went to was the people that I knew that were adopted. They were also adopted with another child from Australia, from Sri Lanka. And it might not have been at the same time, it might have been a few years later, but their siblings looked like them and were from the same country as them. And I think that's probably the thing that I struggled with the most was the physicality of like how different I looked to my family and that I would always have to explain who I was and why I was there. It wasn't ever just, oh, I can look at this person and know that that's part of your family. Um, and so I think that's part why when, and I'm jumping around a bit, but why when I came to have my own family, I felt very strongly about having my own children, um, because I wanted to have that biological link to somebody. But also, interestingly enough, my younger brother, he's quite open to adopting, and he sees the value in that.
Mm.
And one thing that will kind of stay with me probably for the rest of my life was at his 21st birthday, I gave a speech and I said, I just felt like really grateful for the family that I had. And I'm so happy that You know, I was adopted into the family that I have because they're so loving, like that you would never know that I was not from or genetically related to them. And like he just turned to me after and he said, I've never seen you as anyone different. Like you're my sister. I don't see your skin color. So I feel like that like just deepened our connection, I think.
Mm.
More.
I'm happy to hear that this is how you felt growing up in your family. So
Mm,
those years when you were reflecting about your adoptees and you were different than the rest of your family, how did
mhm.
your parents cope with this? Did you keep it in yourself or did you openly talk about it in the family?
No, I don't think I really talked about it too much, to be honest, because they were always very loving and they never treated me like I didn't belong or that I was different. I think that was just something like going through like being a teenager and like rebelling or having a problem or being very like self-centered in developing who you are and how you feel about things. I think it probably was. Look, we always say things when we're upset, that we don't mean, and I know that I said some very terrible things to my parents, but um, I think that that internal struggle was just that. It was internal, and I don't think I ever kind of said, I don't fit in here. This is not like my place. I probably said a few times, well, I'm going back to my mum in Sri Lanka and I'm going to live in there, like just because I wasn't getting what I wanted.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't think I ever really pondered on it too much.
Hmm. Okay,
Mm.
so well, let's maybe take us to when you actually tried to find your biological mother
Mhm.
in Sri Lanka, the whole process, maybe even from the beginning. Uh,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So I think like being adopted, like you always feel like there's something missing, or like you're not a whole person. And I think like I'd just gotten married. Like it had always been something that I said I wanted to do. Um, and I would openly tell people that one day I want to find my birth mother. And there were conversations I remember having with like some of my adopted mother's friends, and they would ask me, and I'd say, yeah, I want to. And I felt like shocked when somebody would say, but what if like she's got another life and she doesn't want to meet you? That was the first time I heard that. I was like, that'd never crossed my mind that she wouldn't want to meet me. And I think um, just hearing that sometimes then like brings up that, I think, very common feeling of being rejected when you're adopted.
Hmm.
Um, because you feel like you
Can
weren't
I
good
ask
enough for them to
one
meet
question?
you. Yeah,
So in that process, before you went to Sri Lanka, you mentioned
yeah,
just before that it always been in you that you wanted to find
yeah,
her. Can you
yeah.
try and explain um, why did you want to meet her? Because you also have had a really, and do have
Yeah,
still a great
yeah,
life in Australia. And I
yeah, I
also
do.
sense that you are feeling like a whole person. So
Mm-mm.
what was the curiosity about?
I think like part of it is when you go to the doctors and they ask about your family history, and even like other places they'll ask you about things that you can't answer and you don't know the answers to. And I think generally when you're in a biological family, you know your history, you know where you've come from, you know that kind of story. And I think just having those question marks um around that stuff, you want to be able to fill in the blanks. So I think like there was that side of it. And then there's also the side of like there are parts of me that are different to my biological family. And sometimes it's like the amount of patience I have, or like I'm not in a rush to do anything. I do things in my own time and my own pace. And um I think like some of those things I didn't really have any answers to. in
That,
terms of like where did that come from?
hmm,
Um, and so I felt like, oh, well, if I go and meet her, like I'll get all of these answers and I'll feel content, I think.
hmm.
Um, and
Makes
so
pretty
yeah,
good sense. Yeah, definitely.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And so I seriously started the process of trying to find her um in the lead up to my wedding in 2018. Or the end of 2017 we got married. So kind of throughout 2017 I was talking to the girl that my parents had sponsored about trying to find her, and luckily enough my mum keeps everything, and so I had all of my I had my birth certificate, like my Sri Lankan birth certificate. I had like my adoption papers, like every sort of documentation that you could need, I had, which was very lucky. And so I was able to scan those and then send them to her, and she used those documents and her husband's connections to be able to find her in Sri Lanka, which was amazing. And then after our wedding at the end of 2017, we went on our honeymoon to Sri Lanka. And I took my adoptive parents and my husband's parents over to Sri Lanka, and my parents like got to meet a lot of their friends that they made while they were over there and living over there for 2 months. And um we got to meet my biological mother and my two of my three half sisters. So that was very surreal
Hmm.
to meet a lot of my family members that I didn't know that I had.
So
Yeah.
did she tell you the background for why she had to give you up for adoption?
Yeah, so my biological mother was 19, so she was fairly young. In Western standards, she was quite young to have a baby. And she was not married. She said that her um boyfriend or partner at the time didn't want to get married and didn't want a baby, and so she felt like that was her only option. Well, that was her best option in terms of providing a good life for herself and for me. Um, and in the end, I think that that was probably her only option. She was from a small village in Sri Lanka, and it was at that time, and it still is, was very frowned upon to have a baby out of wedlock. So um, yeah, that in order to provide a good life for the both of
Hmm.
us, that was the only option.
So did she carry you while she was living in the village and then went to a hospital? Or?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so she was pregnant with me, and while my friend was doing research about my adoption and where I'd come from, she'd asked some people in the town, and they said, "Oh, we remember about 30 years ago there was a baby that she was pregnant, but we don't know where the baby is gone. We knew that she had one." And she'd been pregnant with me in the village, and then had gone to the Salvation Army home for domestic abuse and unwanted pregnancies, and that's where I was born over there. So yeah.
Hmm. Okay.
Mm.
So just a little bit about how was it to meet your mother? So let's take it from 2 points. How was it for you, and how do you
Mhm.
interpret her feelings or thoughts about meeting
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. So we'd been in Sri Lanka for uh, maybe a week at that point, and we'd gone to a few other places and done some touristy things. And then I'd organized with my friend, her and her husband were going to pick us up. So it was like myself, my husband, my mum, my dad, and his parents, and then my friend, her sister, her husband, a couple of their friends as well. Like it was quite a big group of us in this bus. Um, and in the lead up to it, like I was quite moody and stressed, and like I tend to, when I'm getting anxious about things, I'll snap a bit. So I wasn't like the most pleasant person to be around in the lead up to that. The day that we were going to meet her, which I think is like something that I have that's very special to me. I took a pregnancy test and found out that I was also pregnant that day.
Oh,
So that was massive. But obviously, like meeting them for the first time, I didn't want to tell them that. But yeah, so that day I found out I was pregnant, and then we went down to meet her. And for me, um, I was the last person to get out of the bus. So um, when my adoptive mum got out of the bus, like tears started flowing. My adoptive mother was upset because, like, I guess it was a full circle moment of like she, my birth mother had given her a baby, and now she was bringing me back to show like how I'd grown up and the person that I was now. Um, and um, yeah, when I stepped off the bus, like I don't, it's really hard to explain like the feelings there. I think I was just like a bit numb. I didn't really know how to feel about it. Their level of English was quite low, so we did use my friend to interpret a lot of the questions that we had. Um, just making sure that they were okay, and like wanting to know what they thought about it, and if people knew about me, or if this was a secret thing. um and uh I just was trying to take it all in, I suppose.
mm. How about your
But I
siblings in Sri Lanka? Were they
sorry.
your siblings
Yeah.
in Sri Lanka?
um yeah, so my adopted siblings.
No, I'm also thinking, didn't you mention you had two half sisters?
Yeah, so I met so I've got three half sisters, and I met two of them. I'm not sure where the eldest one was, but she wasn't there. So I met them over there as well, and we do have a lot of physical similarities between the three of us. And I also met my like an auntie and cousins, and then I met my grandmother, who like straight away I felt a connection with her. I don't really know why, because at that point I didn't know some of the things that helped like continue to develop the connection, but I really felt like she welcomed me the most, which might not be true, but I just feel like at that moment I felt a stronger connection with her.
Hmm.
Um,
So what about
and
after? After you left Sri Lanka,
yeah.
was it like fulfilling to meet your biological mother and the family?
Yeah, I think the thing is like when we were there, like we gave them some money and like Australian souvenirs and stuff, but we gave them about $500, and that was the wedding present that my husband and I had organized. Instead of giving all of our guests something, we said, "Oh, we're going to put this money towards
Mm.
um people at the orphanage and my birth family if I meet them." So we gave them a significant amount of money. Um, and then after meeting them, like they had tablets and they had phones and stuff, which I didn't realize that they would have. So I was able to keep communicating with them. I'd use Google Translate to speak to them in Sinhala, and they would write in broken English to me, which was fine. Like I could understand what they were saying, and they were able to understand what I was saying to them. But I think after like all the excitement kind of died down, it turned to like, can I help them be sponsored? Can I find them husbands? Can I, like, I think it was, they wanted to me, it felt like they wanted some benefit from me, which is what my friend who found them was initially worried about.
And which is
And I
also
said,
a
don't worry.
common,
Yeah.
it's quite
Yeah.
common story when people go
Yeah.
back and find their biological family.
Yeah.
And also for some people, very disappointing that it
Yeah.
actually is about money, it's about things, it's about how
Yeah.
can this be beneficial for the Sri
Yeah.
Lankan family. And of course,
Yeah.
that is sad for some people.
No, that's right. And I think uh, I didn't, I feel like once I kind of processed meeting them and I was home and in my own environment again, I did feel like I didn't get the answers that I wanted, or I didn't feel that contentment that I wanted. And I just um I left feeling more like I didn't belong, like I didn't belong there and I didn't really fit in here. But the more that time has gone on and I've had my own children and I'm settled in my own life, like I I, I probably it wouldn't have changed who I am meeting them or not meeting them. Like I don't think it had that much effect on my life that I was like, oh, you know, my world is complete.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I feel like once we'd come back and I didn't I didn't sponsor them, I didn't find them husbands, I didn't fulfill their requests because I wanted to get to know them and I wanted them to get to know me. Um, but the communication now has really died down. There isn't any communication from them at all. So it kind of,
Just to understand, so after you didn't support them with the money and finding
yeah,
husband, do you sense there was kind of a disappointment, and then they kind of like just
yeah. Look, there were some and because I guess like my life in Australia and having a career and being a mum, and following some of the passions that I have in sport, has meant that I don't have a lot of time and I don't prioritize messaging them or replying to messages on my phone all the time. So like sometimes there would be messages from them where they would say, "Or are you angry with me?" or "You don't care about us." And yeah, I'll just say, "Sorry, I was at work." Like I can't respond to you when I'm working all the time. So I think when they felt like they weren't getting what they wanted from me, and you know, maybe there was some of that was my part to play in not being as responsive as I wanted. Maybe it wasn't all just about I didn't give them money and I didn't give them the benefit that they thought they wanted or I should give back to them. Um, but yeah, they're just they I didn't feel a connection leaving them. I didn't feel like they were my people. I didn't feel like they knew me and how can they? How can they know me? The family that I'm with now, they're the family that know me. They're the family that raised me into being the person I am today. Um, so the way that you can't just be a family member because you say you are or your bloodline says you are. There's more to being family than just your genetic background. So I feel like that's why that there probably wasn't a connection there for me and probably why our communication frequency died down to how it is now that we don't communicate really at all. So
okay, yeah. And I hear you kind of accepting that this is okay.
yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
and I feel I I guess I do feel content about how my life is now. I'm happy. Like I have two beautiful children. I have a loving, supportive family around me who have, you know, supported me to achieve a lot of things that I've wanted to achieve in my life. So I feel like my life would have been very, very different had I not been adopted and not been given the opportunities that I have been given. So in that way, like I am very grateful to my biological family and my biological mother. Yeah, I know that my life wouldn't be the way that it is without her making that decision. Um, but yeah, I definitely feel like I'm happy with how it has worked out, I suppose.
Mm. So now we are at the end of this podcast. So is there anything you would like to share? Now we are going to kind of wrap up everything.
I guess I just feel like, you know, adoptees and adoptees from Sri Lanka, especially, like sharing their stories with each other, because I guess I've found out, like, as I've gone on and met different people and met people that are adopted from different countries, that our experiences of what it is to be adopted, regardless of where we come from, is different. And um, maybe some of that is to do with like our upbringing or just the people that we are inherently. But I think you never know who your experience or your story, who that might help or who that might support through a time. I feel like there are probably a lot more traumatic stories than mine, and stories where individuals have had to deal with a lot more difficult and more challenging situations than I have. But even my story might help someone who's kind of feeling like they don't fit in, or someone who is really wanting to find their birth family and think that that's going to change everything for their life, and change how they feel about themselves. And that's just not always the case. Like, I think you go into that feeling like it's going to give you all the answers that you want it to, and it doesn't always do that. And in my case, it didn't. But it did highlight all the wonderful things that I do have in my life, and how grateful I am to be able to have the life that I have now. So yeah.
So, on that note, I will
Mm.
say thank you very much for participating in Voices of Us. Um, yeah, thank you,
Yeah,
thank
thank you so
you.
much for having me. And I look forward to hearing everyone else's stories too.
Sure, sure. Okay, so bye bye from Sri Lanka.
Bye. Bye from Australia.